The Bold and the Beautiful, Love, Poison, and the end of an era in the grand saga of The Bold and the Beautiful, where love triangles reign and loyalty is always a gamble. Brooke Logan once again found herself at a dangerous crossroads. For decades, her heart had been tethered to Ridge Forrester through marriages, affairs, betrayals, and reconciliations that had become legendary. But this time, things were different. Time had withered her resolve. Years of forgiving and forgetting had left her exhausted, no longer willing to be a passive passenger in the endless ride of second chances. So when Ridge returned at conflict, remorseful, and full of that old spark, Brooke did not throw herself into his arms. She drew a line. And this time, it wasn't in sand. Instead of another rushed wedding, a cycle they'd repeated so many times it had lost meaning, Brooke set the terms. If Ridge truly believed they were meant to be, if he truly wanted forever, then he had to prove it, not with promises, but with partnership. She challenged him to co-lead the Forrester Couture Anniversary Project, a high-stakes, high-visibility initiative celebrating decades of the brand's iconic status. It wasn't just about fashion. It was about whether they could finally build something together that wouldn't fall apart the moment emotions flared. Could they be equals? Could they collaborate, trust, create without falling back into old patterns? Brooke wasn't bluffing. If Ridge faltered, if he pulled back, or let pride steer him off course, she would walk away for good. She wasn't the same woman who would compromise her dignity just to keep him around. She had grown stronger, wiser. For Brooke, this was about more than romance. It was about reclaiming control over her narrative. At first, Ridge accepted the challenge with confidence. The chemistry was undeniable. Working side by side, sketching, directing models, making decisions, she slipped into a rhythm that felt natural. But underneath the surface, old wounds still bled. Trust, bruised over the years, didn't heal overnight. Creative clashes flared. Ridge struggled to let go of his instinct to dominate, while Brooke refused to back down. Yet amid the tension, there were moments, small, electric moments where their synergy sparked something real. It wasn't love on fire. It was something rarer, mutual respect, hard-won and halting. But just as they seemed on the verge of something new, something stable and true, the ground gave way. The night of the Forrester Couture Anniversary Gala arrived, simmering with elegance, attended by the press, celebrities, and fashion elites. Brooke and Ridge stood front and center, co-hosts and co-creators. The runway dazzled. The crowd roared. And for a brief moment, everything seemed perfect. Then, as applause still echoed, Ridge collapsed. Gasps erupted. Chaos followed. Brooke was the first to reach him, cradling his face as blood trickled from the corner of his mouth. His eyes, wide with fear, searched hers for something answers, forgiveness, salvation. She screamed for help. Paramedics arrived within minutes. He was rushed to the hospital, unconscious, unresponsive. As the Forrester family scrambled for answers, the worst was confirmed. Ridge had been poisoned. Not food poisoning, not an allergic reaction poison. A deliberate act. A criminal one. The hospital worked quickly to flush the toxins, but his condition remained critical. Brooke, shaking, refused to leave his side. Then, another shockwave. Taylor Hayes was found dead in her home, a half-empty glass in her hand and a letter beside her. The letter, scrawled in her familiar handwriting, said it all. Both of us will die together. The implications were immediate and horrifying. Taylor had poisoned herself and Ridge. The woman who had loved Ridge as long and as deeply as Brooke, in her own quieter way, had chosen a final, fatal exit. And in her desperation, she had tried to take Ridge with her. No one saw it coming. Taylor had long played the role of steady contrast to Brooke's chaos. A healer, a mother, a woman with empathy. But the years had worn her down too. Watching Ridge constantly drift between her and Brooke, never fully choosing, never fully committing, had shattered something inside her. She had given him chance after chance, always believing that their bond, their history, their family would be enough to anchor him. But it never was. And when Ridge returned to Brooke, not just physically, but emotionally and professionally must have known it was final. That whatever part of him she had hoped to keep was gone. In her pain, she didn't just give up on Ridge. She gave up on herself. Detectives arrived. The investigation launched. Toxicology confirmed it. Taylor had ingested the same poison found in Ridge's blood. But Ridge had taken less. The doctors believed he had a chance of slim, but real. He had collapsed quickly, which helped. His system hadn't fully absorbed the dose. Still, he hovered between life and death. Brooke, caught between heartbreak and fury, didn't know what to feel. Taylor had tried to kill the man she loved, but she was also gone lost to a darkness no one had seen coming. The grief was twisted, layered, impossible to compartmentalize. Steffi and Thomas were devastated. Their mother, brilliant, compassionate, loving, had spiraled into something unrecognizable. They blamed no one. And yet, the silence between them and Brooke grew cold. Unspoken blame hung in the air. If Ridge had chosen Taylor, would this have happened? If Brooke hadn't issued her challenge, would Taylor have given up? The media exploded. The Forrester brand, though professionally celebrated after the couture show, was thrust into scandal. Headlines screamed betrayal, obsession, tragedy. Paparazzi camped outside the hospital. Everyone wanted to know, would Ridge survive? Would Brooke speak? What drove Taylor to such a desperate act? But Brooke stayed silent. She stayed at Ridge's bedside, night after night, whispering words he might never hear. Apologies, promises, truths too long buried. In those quiet moments, stripped of cameras, spotlights, and family politics, Brooke faced the full weight of their shared past. Every fight, every kiss, every decision that hurt someone else. She didn't excuse any of it. She didn't pretend they were innocent. But she did wonder, after all the drama, after all the damage, had any of it been worth it? Ridge stirred days later, weak, pale, alive. His first word was her name. Brooke wept, not for love rekindled, but for life preserved. There was no rush to discuss weddings or futures. There was no triumph. Only the fragile miracle of survival and the haunting absence of Taylor. In the days that followed, Ridge learned the truth. It crushed him. The guilt, the horror. He had loved Taylor in his own broken way. He had never imagined she would descend into such despair. He blamed himself for the mixed signals, for the emotional limbo, for not protecting her even from herself. But Brooke didn't let him drown in guilt. Not because he didn't deserve it, but because it wouldn't bring Taylor back. And it wouldn't change the future unless they changed. And so Brooke once again made a choice. She didn't recommit. She didn't reject him. She simply said, if we move forward, we do it right. No lies. No triangles. No ghosts in our bed. Ridge agreed. He didn't know if he was ready for love again, but he was ready for truth. The Forrester family closed ranks. The fashion house carried on, bruised but resilient. And Taylor was remembered in memorials that tried to capture both her grace and her pain without romanticizing her end. In the shadows of scandal, one thing became clear. The bold and the beautiful had entered a new chapter. One where love would have to be earned, not assumed. Where second chances had limits. And where even the most iconic stories could be rewritten if those who lived them dared to break the cycle. The walls were closing in on Will Spencer. He couldn't sleep, couldn't eat, couldn't speak without stammering, couldn't breathe without the tightness in his chest reminding him of that night sound of her voice fading, the sight of her body going still beneath his hands. The weight of silence when he realized what he had done. Even after the cleanup, even after the fake note, even after Bill Spencer wiped every trace of evidence from that warehouse and made Luna's death look like a tragic mistake, Will knew the truth. And the truth was eating him alive. The boy genius, the Spencer legacy, the kid who was supposed to be untouchable. Now he couldn't even look at his reflection without wanting to smash the mirror. Katie was the first to notice something was wrong. She saw it in the way Will flinched when she walked into a room. How he stayed locked in his bedroom for hours. How he deleted all his social media overnight. How he suddenly couldn't stand being touched. The spark in his ice cone. The sharp wit, the teenage arrogance, the smug half-smell gone. She confronted Bill, voice low, measured, furious. "What did you do to our son?" Bill didn't answer right away. Because the truth was he didn't know how to fix it. He had cleaned up murders, crushed corporations, spun entire media cycles in his favor. But this wasn't business. This was Will, his son. And nothing he did, no bribe, no threat, no media blackout was healing what had broken inside that boy. Katie pushed harder. "You've been shutting me out since the funeral. Since Luna. You know something." "What is it?" Still, Bill said nothing. But his silence was an answer. And Katie felt her stomach drop. For all their battle custody fights, screaming matches, Betrayalski had never feared for Will's soul. Until now. And so, for the first time in years, she didn't shut Bill out. She didn't threaten him with lawyers or storm out. She stayed. Because whatever had happened in Wait for Darkness had followed Wilhelmite was bigger than her resentment. Bigger than their history. And it was devouring their son from the inside out. They became reluctant allies. Co-parents on red alert. One would sit outside Will's room during the night in case he cried out. The other monitored his screen time, his messages, his school attendance. They coordinated therapy sessions, coordinated his nutrition, watched him like a hawk, protected him like a fortress. And through that protection through that unspoken war room alliance, something unexpected began to happen. They softened. Old rhythms crept back in. Quiet ones. Katie would brew his favorite tea without being asked. Bill would fix the squeaky hinge on her door. She'd fold his dry cleaning when she dropped off Will's laundry. He'd leave extra copies of Will's school reports on her desk before she even knew she needed them. There were no declarations, no apologies, just the slow, persistent hum of familiarity returning. Of two people moving like gears that still despite everything fit. And then came the breaking point. Will had a full-blown panic attack during a school presentation. He collapsed in front of his classmates, shaking, crying, hyperventilating. He screamed her name, Luna. The school called Katie, then Bill. They both arrived at the same time. No press, no assistance. Just two parents ripping open the nurse's office door. Will couldn't speak. Couldn't explain. Just clutched his chest and whispered, "I'm not okay. I'm not okay." That night, Katie sat at the edge of his bed. Bill stood in the doorway. The distance between them narrowed by the gravity of what they were trying to save. "He's drowning," Katie whispered. "I know," Bill said. "I can't do this alone. You're not." And in that moment, neither strategic nor romantic, Bill placed a hand on her shoulder. Not possessive, not leading, just grounding. They both stayed in Will's room that night. Katie on the armchair, Bill against the wall, watching their son breathe. Outside the Spencer home, the fallout from Luna's death hadn't slowed. Fashion houses pulled back from joint ventures. The press speculated on a scandal no one had proof for, but everyone could feel. Luna's name trended for weeks. Conspiracy forums linked her to Will. Photographers swarmed Spencer publications. Rich Forrester issued a statement of condolences but refused to answer questions. Steffi locked down her social calendar. Lee Finnegan refused to comment, but privately, she hadn't stopped investigating. Whispers about a cover-up turned into questions about corporate morality. Investors got cold feet. Magazine editors paused campaigns. Buyers hesitated to align with brands tied to Spencer Power. And through it all, Bill and Katie kept their heads down. They had one mission, Will. Katie dropped her PR projects to be more present. Bill deferred key board meetings. Spencer Publications moved into defensive mode. Quiet PR crisis teams, private reputation management consultants. No public outrage, yet the industry felt the chill. Hope tried to reach out. So did Brooke. but Katie turned them away. "I don't have time for your guilt," she told Hope. "And I'm done helping your mother rewrite her messes." Hope didn't argue. She just nodded and left flowers outside Will's door. Meanwhile, Rich reappeared for a single meeting with Bill. "It wasn't friendly?" "You owe me the truth," Rich said coldly. Bill didn't flinch. "You owe yourself control of your family." The meeting ended in silence and a slammed door. But even Rich could see it. Will was broken. And only two people could hold him together. Weeks turned into months. Will made progress. Tiny ones. He started attending therapy twice a week. He got back into reading. He went for walks with Katie. Started drawing again. Sometimes he smiled. Not often. But it happened. And when it did, Katie and Bill exchanged glances that said more than words ever could. One night, Will asked Bill, "Do you think people can come back from anything?" Bill paused. "Not everything, but enough." Will nodded, then whispered, "Thanks for not giving up." Katie sat outside the room that night, wiping her tears silently. Bill joined her on the couch. They didn't speak. He just reached for her hand, and she didn't pull away. The fashion world would recover. The media would move on. Scandals would shift. But inside the Spencer family, something deeper had taken root. A reckoning. And possibly a second chance.